Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Stinking Albatross Podcast. My name is Alissa Golob, and I'm here joined with my co-host, Scott Hayward.
Hey, Alissa, how's it going today?
Not too bad. It is crazy hot here. I don't know what it's like in Ontario, but I cannot handle the heat. I moved to Alberta to get away from the heat.
Well, that's good for stampede weather, right?
Yeah, except when you go down to Stampede, it's like 20 degrees hotter in the concrete jungle with all these people around. So I'm going on Friday, so we'll see how it goes.
Yeah, it's hot here, but I mean, it's Southern Ontario, right? In the summer, so nothing new. Hasn't rained for a bit. So I've been watering my grass daily, religiously, because I'm that person now. I have my barbecue back there, and I water the grass.
If you water it too much, though, can it burn?
Oh, so that's a very good point. So you don't want to water during the day because the water can actually magnify the light as it evaporates. So you want to water either first thing in the morning or in the evening. So I water in the evening after we're not in the backyard anymore.
Everyone over the age of 60 is totally loving this podcast right now.
Maybe we should have like a spin-off podcast.
Well, you actually did landscaping, so you are quite the wealth of knowledge.
That was probably one of my best, no offense to you, but that was probably one of my best jobs, was mowing grass in the summer with my best friend. Like, I absolutely loved it. I've always loved taking care of lawns, my dad's lawn growing up, neighbors' lawns, and now my own lawn. So it is not only just a hobby of mine, but a passion, a deep, abiding passion, lawn care.
Well, there you go. If you mow your lawn, Scott will love you.
Yeah, that's right. And if you water it, you got to take care of it, you know? It's that's one thing I hate, and I noticed that in Southern Ontario moving here, is that there's a lot of people that, it's not like the lawns are like unkept per se, but no one really cares to water it, like at least not back home. I don't know what it's like in Calgary, but back home, like everyone takes care of their lawn.
I feel like the lawn talk with Scott and Alissa has gone on long enough, so maybe we can continue how the lawns are in Calgary next week.
Yeah, we'll get an update.
Okay. Today's episode is brought to you by LaRosse Media. They produce podcasts, videos, commercials, and marketing plans. Check them out at larossemedia.com. So, the question everyone's been wondering is, how was your weekend?
Yeah, that's the burning question. That's why people come to this pod, right? So not a whole lot this weekend. Watched the Bombers absolutely destroy the Lions. Like, that was supposed to be like a match of titans, and in many ways it was, because Nathan Rourke, who's the quarterback for the Lions, like, they'd be down by 20 points, he'd just get out there on the field and he would just lob like a 50-60 yard bomb for a touchdown. Like, you don't even see that in the NFL. It was quite something to watch. But the Bombers won 43-22, so they're still the top cats in the league for sure. So they're definitely going for their three-peat. Other than that, yesterday, so Monday night, we went to go see a couple friend of ours here in Hamilton, and his birthday's later this week, and we felt bad for him because a couple of weeks ago, him and his wife were out rollerblading, like in like a concrete rink that the city of Hamilton has, and they didn't have any inline blades, so they had the roller skates that have like the two on either side for 4 wheels altogether. So like, he was kind of like Bambi out on the ice a little bit, and he saw that he was about to crash because he's like, I'm just gonna give up and I'm done. And there's like this, I guess, concrete barrier all around the rink, and he tumbled over, but not all of him did, and his ankle stayed, and so basically it was a 90-degree break. And his fibula broke clean in half right at the ankle. So he is done. He is done for 6 weeks. We felt bad for him because he can't go anywhere. He's like on pain meds and crutches or whatever. So we prepared a nice birthday supper for him here at our place, and then drove 20 minutes to their place, trying to keep it warm and in a cooler and everything. And he really, really wanted brisket. So it was a challenge, but I think we did all right.
I didn't know that straight people roller skated.
Well, there you are.
Well, that sounds fun. We went to a Stampede breakfast. It was our first one. It was in Cochrane, in a community called Fireside, and there were pony rides and a bouncy castle. And in true toddler fashion, my child had a complete meltdown. There was no shade. And these are the things that we now think about. Whereas before, I would have just enjoyed the free breakfast and the music and talked with people. But now I have to deal with the toddler melting down in 25-degree weather. possibly sunburnt. So that was basically our experience at the Stampede breakfast. But we are going to Stampede on Friday night. We'll go to the Chucks and the evening show. So that'll be good.
Yeah, I always like Stampede. I know we all went together last year during, I guess, like half Stampede or whatever you want to call it. They didn't have everything, but yeah, it was a lot of fun. But speaking of toddlers and breakdowns, maybe that's a good segue right into our first segment of what happened in the leadership race last week.
Yes.
I think
I mean, there's so much to say about this. Like, we could probably spend an entire podcast talking about Patrick Brown if we really wanted to. Like, what a character in politics.
Yeah, like a phoenix rising from the ashes, only to fly too close to the sun and be burnt back down again. Like,
and then rise again. And go too close to the sun. We're deja vuing it all over.
Do you maybe want to go through a bit of a timeline? So for people who listen here, okay. So Alissa was involved in pro-life politics before I was. Like, she wrote me into this. And so one of the very first things that you had to deal with your job back at CLC was the leadership race way back when for the provincial Conservatives in Ontario. So I think it's appropriate that maybe you start us off because you can give us a good long background there.
Okay, so just for those who don't know, Patrick Brown was a candidate in the Conservative Party leadership race, and he was disqualified over the weekend. So we will get to that, but we're just going to start with a brief timeline because I think it's really important to understand who Patrick Brown really is and what his political career has encompassed so far, so you can really understand what's happening present day. So, I mean, there's a whole timeline here in the Toronto Star. He was elected in 2000 as a 22-year-old, elected to City Council. In 2006, he was then elected into the House of Commons, beating out a Liberal incumbent, and then he was re-elected in 2008 and 2011. Then in 2015, he wins the leadership of the Ontario PC party, replacing Tim Hudak and beating Christine Elliott for the position. So this is kind of when I first experienced Patrick Brown. He really wanted the support of Campaign Life Coalition, the organization that I used to work with. We would have sit-down meetings. We were pretty close in communication with him on a regular basis. He had voted pro-life during his time in the House of Commons, so he was known as a social conservative. So, of course, he was our go-to for the leadership race over Christine Elliott, who is not a social conservative. So I got to know him a little bit there, didn't think much of him, just another kind of MP working his way into the array of provincial politics. But then different things started to happen. So he became known as the flip-flopper way more than Aaron O'Toole. I mean, Aaron O'Toole is constantly compared to Brown, but no one can match his experience as a flip-flopper. And it all started over the sex ed curriculum in Ontario. So basically, Kathleen Wynne, the former premier and Liberal leader, had a radical sex ed curriculum where, you would be taught all these really sexual explicit things at very young ages. Grade 1, grade 3, they were talking about fluidity, gender orientation. In grade 4 and 5, they were talking about like masturbation, anal sex, oral sex, like just really inappropriate things for really young children. And so he originally told Campaign Life Coalition and SOCONs in general that he was opposed to the sex ed curriculum. He said, I say it everywhere, I'm opposed to it. And then there was a by-election, and I can't recall when this do you remember when the by-election was? It was maybe in 2018, probably, or maybe 2017, I can't recall. But it was in Scarborough, and the PC candidate, Raymond Cho, was running against an independent Queenie Yu, and she was known as being against the sex ed curriculum. And so Patrick Brown and the PCs sent a letter, both in English and in Chinese, to all the residents of Scarborough, talking about different things about the PC Ontario party, but also that they were opposed to the sex ed curriculum because they needed Queenie's votes to win. And then literally within 24 hours, they backtracked that, but they didn't backtrack it to the residents of Scarborough. They wrote about it in the Toronto Star. So the people who, the Chinese Canadians who are living in Scarborough who are reading this letter in Chinese are definitely not the same ones reading the Toronto Star. So he was trying to have his cake and eat it too. Is that the saying?
Yeah, you got it right.
Okay. I haven't had cake for a long time after the baby. So, but so anyway, clearly they were trying to play both sides of the coin when it comes to the radical sex ed curriculum. That was just the beginning of his flip-flop, but it was a massive one. He lost a lot of support both within the conservative movement in Ontario, but also within caucus. And then shortly after that, he just became more and more progressive, and then radical, to the point of when the Liberals introduced a bubble zone law in Ontario around abortion clinics. He pulled it, or he what was it called? He said that the Ontario PCs had to have a unanimous consent motion, so no one could freely vote for it in caucus. They just were going to fast track it all the way through. Similar to what Erin O'Toole did for the conversion therapy bill that everyone was upset about.
That one was actually a recorded division. So that one actually went down to a vote because there was an independent MPP, and I can't remember which one it was, who voted against it in the Legislative Assembly of Ontario, which means that it had to go to recorded division because there was no unanimous consent. And when Sam Osterhoff got elected in a by-election shortly before this vote, Patrick Brown had ensured that Sam didn't take his oath of swearing in until after the vote, so that Sam couldn't embarrass Patrick Brown right off the bat. So Sam wasn't even technically a voting member of the Legislative Assembly of Ontario at that point, and Patrick Brown purposely did that so that he could try to have as much unanimity within his caucus as possible, which obviously there wasn't, most definitely in the caucus, and of course broadly within the party and the Conservative movement in Ontario.
Okay, so there wasn't an official unanimous consent motion, but there was an agreement within the three parties that they would fast track this bill.
Yeah, it was an independent MPP, I believe, that caused the recorded division on that vote, if I recall correctly.
Okay, so I mean, this is the type of guy that Patrick Brown was. On top of that, just the worst, most corrupt nominations of all time. This was before the 2018 provincial election. Scott and I personally worked on multiple nominations with various candidates. The most kind of infamous being Derek Duval in Ottawa. He was approved to be a candidate, worked really hard, sold tons of memberships, way more than
thousands, like 2,000 memberships. And it was one of the very first nominations that we were a part of.
Yeah, we had just started, and it was gonna blow his opposition out of the water, who happened to be Amanda Simard. And the night before the nomination, we actually went to Ottawa to work personally the day of the nomination, and the night before, the party called him and disqualified him, and the reasoning being is that there was a video that was circulating of him when he was one of the organizers of a hockey fundraiser, and just as a joke sort of video, they had him with a hockey stick, and it was a bunch of poutine, and he ate poutine off this hockey stick, but they pretended that it was a hamster, and they said that was the reason why they disqualified him. Don't ask me what the problem even was if it was a hamster, but it was just the most hilariously lame, ridiculous excuse ever because they wanted their preferred candidate to win. Oftentimes they wouldn't even give excuses, and maybe that was better because the excuses that they were giving at the time were absolutely insane.
Yeah, so it happened time and time again. I mean, do you remember that nomination meeting down in Hamilton where there was buses and buses of people who didn't even live in the riding were bussed in to go against our pro-life candidate who we were running there at the time. There
were stuffed ballot boxes, like alleged stuffed ballot boxes where you would be there, like where the ballots would be stuck together because clearly somebody filled them out, not people who were voting. And
I remember after that incident, for all our volunteers at nomination meetings after that, we trained them so that before balloting would begin, before people would put their ballots in the box, that they demanded that the boxes be open and that they can see the inside of the box, which is just good practice, period, whether it's a nomination race, leadership race, whatever. But I learned that lesson the hard way under the leadership of Patrick Brown. So thank you, Patrick Brown. But that's the whole reason actually why we sent you out to Alberta, Alissa, was because we eventually had made the decision that, like, listen, we can't go out and do all these church presentations and whatever and sell all these thousands of memberships per riding if, like, in Derek's case, like 8 hours before the vote's supposed to start, they just randomly get disqualified by Patrick Brown and the people around Patrick Brown. And so we decided we're going to turn our gaze over to Alberta because Kenny was thinking of going out there. And that's why you're out there.
Which is funny because I drove out to Alberta at the end of January 2018. And I was with my brother and we were listening to all different types of podcasts, music, whatever. And then while I was driving out from Ontario to Alberta, the news broke that Patrick Brown had resigned as Ontario PC leader. And the reason why is because there were two women that came forward with alleged sexual assault allegations. And both of them said that they were underage, that they were in high school, that, Patrick exposed himself, told her to perform oral sex on him. One of them became a staffer after meeting him on a plane, I believe it was, and he would take her on trips, pay for things under, the guise of being the PC leader. And so anyway, this news broke and it happened fast. Like the news came out at around 9:45 p.m. I think Eastern time, and by 1:30 a.m. he was gone. And that was after the news broke. They had an emergency caucus meeting, their comms, everything. It didn't work, and he had no friends. He was
at the podium by himself.
Yeah.
And then he did the perp walk.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So he was answering questions by himself. No politicians would stand behind him. They chased him to his car. He did the perp walk out to his car, said he was going to fight everything, did the caucus meeting. The caucus meeting, even though it was private, it was revealed to, I think it was the National Post.
Maclean's. It was Maclean's. Yeah.
And they kind of they released a transcript basically where everyone was going after him. No one wanted him to stay as leader. Everyone was pressuring him, and basically he just had to resign both in that meeting that he was going to leave and then resign as premier. And I think in part he had no friends because he had done all these shady things as leader that he had no respect and no friends in caucus. And so I almost turned the car around because I'm like, sweet, I don't have to go to Alberta anymore. I can go back to Ontario and we can actually make it a better province and elect a better leader. So anyway, on that note, afterwards, he became mayor in 2018. So he resigned as leader of the PC caucus in January. He became mayor of Brampton in 2018
Barely, mind you. Like it was a really close race. Yeah, it was like 49% to 48% or something like that.
Okay, yeah. So even still, and then he decided to run for leader once Aaron O'Toole stepped down, and while he was creating his leadership campaign, he was also simultaneously, since he left or resigned as the Ontario PC leader, he was suing CTV, which broke the news of these sexual assault allegations, for $8 million. And while he was kind of creating his leadership team, it was revealed that he had settled with CTV and that there were multiple allegations that were the allegations weren't factually incorrect, but some of the story was factually incorrect, and they settled. And so the only thing that I could tell that was factually incorrect was that one of the women who had come forward said that she was underage in high school at the time, but afterwards she changed her story to say that she was actually 19 and had graduated high school. But there was no confirmation that what actually happened, the sexual things that happened and pressures that happened, were incorrect. So I'm not sure if we'll ever know, but just because
it's still creepy as hell.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, like especially for someone who was potentially going to be premier of the largest province, at least in terms of population in Canada, one of the largest sub-national governments in North America. Like Ontario, if it were a state in the United States, would be definitely in the top 10 most populous states. So like, you should have a fairly serious person vying for those positions, and this like hitting on 19-year-old girls at the club or whatever and taking them home, which by the way, the other thing that's also creepy on top of it is that Patrick Brown doesn't drink. So all these girls have been drinking all night. They come back to his condo or whatever, and then he's, sober as a cucumber. Just creepy.
Yeah, I mean, Yeah, it's all pretty disgusting. So the fact that he could even run as leader is ridiculous to me. But I mean, whatever. The democratic process, let the voters decide. So he entered the leadership race, and then he was disqualified this past weekend. And the reason he was disqualified, I'll just read an excerpt here from the news that. There were allegations of financial impropriety by a whistleblower who had been part of his campaign team. So this woman named Debbie Jadwain, a longtime conservative organizer, said through her lawyer last Thursday that she had been paid by a third-party company for her work on the Brown campaign, and that Brown had been involved in the arrangement. So basically he said to her, come, you can work for my friend. He owns this private company. And then you can also volunteer with my campaign. And it goes against the rules because corporations or third parties cannot pay a person to work on a leadership campaign or any campaign for that matter because it's counted as a donation. So it goes against not only Elections Canada rules, but obviously the rules for the Conservative Party of Canada.
Yeah, and it's no surprise. I wouldn't be surprised if there were other issues dealing with the Patrick Brown campaign. It's interesting because a lot of the people who were on the Patrick Brown campaign were on Aaron O'Toole's both leadership campaign, and then once Aaron O'Toole was a leader for like 10 months or however long it was, in his OLO as well. But those same people were also part of the Patrick Brown office of leader of the opposition and campaign team going all the way back to 2015. So these guys have been around Patrick for a very long time. I don't necessarily know these people believe that Patrick could have won, but I think the whole premise for a lot of these people being on his campaign was to help ensure that Pierre Poilievre wouldn't win. So when Patrick Brown is saying that, we went out and sold 150,000 memberships, I think that number is probably relatively accurate, given that we now know there's going to be just over 675,000 members of the party who are eligible to vote in the leadership race. I'm not saying that Pierre Poilievre would have lost if Patrick Brown were in the leadership race, but definitely, brought a different dynamic to it. But regardless, I'm kind of surprised given all of Patrick's history, the bridges that he has burned over the years, that the Leadership Election Organizing Committee allowed him to run, but wouldn't allow Joseph Bourgault or any of those other people, social conservatives, to run. I had heard, I don't know if this is accurate or not, I had heard that the vote at the Leadership Election Organizing Committee back in March or April to allow Patrick to run, Patrick won that vote by one single vote. So I think it was contentious all the way through within the party anyway. But yeah, what a disaster, not only for Patrick Brown, but for the Conservative Party as well. Like, here's another example of how, like, the full-time staffers in the party, like, just can't get it right. This should be an exciting time that the party has some really strong candidates that are running for the leadership. They have by far the most amount of members of any political party in the history of Canada, and this is the story that I think a lot of people are going to remember throughout the summer.
Yeah, and like the progressives are reeling over this, which I find hilarious. Like, I have to take enjoyment over things like that. Most specifically, Warren Kinsella, who has alleged that this was sort of like a plan from the beginning, that Debbie was some sort of Pierre Poilievre plant that was set to go work in the Brown campaign and then destroy it. I don't know if that can be proven, but he's basically alluding to that fact by writing op-eds in the Toronto Sun asking questions that are leading towards that story. Do you think that there's any merit to this? I mean, I know we can't know for certain, but do you think that she has jumped ship to the Poilievre campaign? I know that two other MPs have, from the Brown campaign to the Poilievre campaign, in terms of endorsements. So is this just another situation like that to help the Poilievre campaign because he's the favored candidate, obviously, by both the establishment and potentially even National Council?
Yeah, I really don't know. To be certain, I don't think any of us can be certain, except for those who are on LEOC or people on LEOC who are directly telling us, those types of conversations. I don't know Debbie, so I have no idea. I know that prior to the leadership race, she was retweeting and liking a bunch of tweets from Pierre Poilievre. I think a lot of people probably were at that time in the throes of Aaron O'Toole no longer being leader. But I think two things could be true at the same time. I think that perhaps within the Patrick Brown campaign, there were a bunch of rules being broken with the party leadership rules, and potentially as well with the Canada Elections Act. And at the same time, you have a bunch of Pierre Poilievre supporters, whether they be, members of caucus, members of parliament, and senators, candidates of record, people, directly on his campaign team, pressuring members of National Council and the Leadership Election Organizing Committee to disqualify and get rid of Patrick Brown. I think two things can be true at the same time.
And then when you look at emails of Jean Charest saying, this is a crime what happened to Patrick Brown, he doesn't give a shit what happens to Brown. He just knows that this is going to help the politics.
So as long as Jean Charest's poster is still up in Patrick Brown's room where he can gaze upon him lovingly, I think that's all he really cares about. One thing I think Jean Charest is actually correct on is that the party should be more transparent about these things. When you disqualify candidates, whether it be a leadership candidate or a candidate running to be, or a contestant technically running to be a candidate in a nomination meeting for a specific riding, and they are disqualified by the party, I think the party, this has been happening so often for so long. I think one of the reasons it's been happening is because organizations like ours are now actually competitive in a lot of these nomination races, and it's not just going to be a cakewalk. Take Leela here, for example, provincially in Alberta, pardon me. So I think that the party establishment, their only kind of safety valve, so to speak, is these random spurious reasons for disqualifications. And I think whether it's Patrick Brown, who is no social conservative, no pro-lifer, or whether it be Joseph Bourgault, or anyone else for that matter, in any party, not just the Conservative Party, federally or provincially, I think that we're now at the point here in Canada with party membership, with media, and just with the general public, that they should be honest as to what the reasons are for disqualification. And if the reason is, hey, we think you're too pro-life, so you're disqualified, say it, because then we can keep you accountable. Have the courage and fortitude, have the balls to say it, and not hide behind some bullshit, disqualification reasoning process. I don't know how many times we've been having to work with National Council for the Conservative Party of Canada to get our people on there so that candidates, leading in the 2021 election campaign, there were contestants who are running for nominations who were spuriously disqualified, and then we had to fight it, and we won oftentimes at the National Council level because we had enough votes at that time to overturn, again, the bullshit reasons that the leader and the staff from the party are giving. So I think this battle is just going to continue for the next little bit. Patrick Brown did it so many times back in 2016-17. So I'm happy that he's getting his taste of his own medicine. It's
poetic justice for Patrick Brown to be disqualified when he disqualified so many people for spurious reasons.
Yeah, exactly. So anyway, that was the Conservative leadership race last week. None of that. Sorry, go ahead.
Like Jonathan Van Maren says, Patrick Brown is like a bad cold. Every time you think he's gone, he's back. So I'm sure he won't be gone for long.
Yeah, each time it's more and more difficult to come back, right? I mean, he's not an old guy. He's still in his 40s. But this is just another black stain amongst many on his record.
And on that note, we'll take a quick break and we'll be right back.
We live in a world that grows through communication.
Every connection comes from a dream to be heard and realized.
To welcome a better future. What are your dreams?
LaRosse Media will help communicate your vision through our professional video production services and marketing strategies.
Start building connections to your future audience. Visit larossemedia.com
and be sure to check out our extended service options.
Dream, produce, market, succeed with LaRosse Media.
Serving Canada from coast to coast to coast.
And we're back. Now, in the wake of Roe versus Wade, the progressives on the radical left are now calling on Trudeau to fulfill a Liberal platform promise, which was to defund crisis pregnancy centers. And in their platform, they actually said that these crisis pregnancy centers, quote, provide dishonest counseling to women about their rights and about the options available to them at all stages of pregnancy. Now, they could not only lose their charitable status, but they could also lose other privileges such as the Canada Emergency Wage Subsidy. And during the pandemic, over 28 crisis pregnancy centers received this federal money, which was a program that provided wage support to employers affected by the pandemic. Now, both Scott and I have been intimately involved in crisis pregnancy centers, and the way that they're portrayed both in the media and by the Liberal Party is completely factually incorrect. Just ask all the women who have been helped by them. But this also leads to a bigger problem in that if the Trudeau government is just going to defund any organization that they disagree with on a cultural level, that sets a enormously bad precedent not only for them but also for future parties. To the fact that, like, if you are against abortion, you won't be able to get charitable status. So that doesn't just apply to crisis pregnancy centers. It could also apply to basically any and all churches across Canada.
Yeah, it's very dangerous legislation. Well, first off, there is no legislation. Personally, yeah. I don't think there'll be any legislation because I don't know how you'd even write that legislation. Like, where in the Income Tax Act under what's known as qualified donees, that's the technical name for charitable organizations, like how would you list that out? Because it's very, very broad within the Income Tax Act of what qualifies as a qualified donee. And then what you have are, in addition to statute, you have what's called regulations. So within the regulations, which oftentimes like a minister's office or in this case the Canada Revenue Agency will come up with to further define, kind of the rules around these sorts of things. Even then, it's fairly broad as to what a charity can be, and then that's not a bad thing. That's a good thing. So you have different categories for charities. You have education, you have religious, you have good works. And so under the good works umbrella is where you would find a lot of these crisis pregnancy centers that do wonderful work. So it would be very, very difficult for the Liberals to do it. I think the reason why the Liberals said that they would do something about this is because during the 2021 federal election campaign that happened about a year ago, they were trying to pigeonhole Aaron O'Toole on abortion. And Aaron O'Toole said he was pro-abortion despite his voting record up until the point of Kathy Wagenthal's bill of sex-selective abortion, banning that practice, which is another piece of legislation that Pierre Poilievre voted against. He voted in favor of sex-selective abortion. They were trying to pigeonhole him because it was a little bit more difficult for them to do that compared to Andrew Scheer. So in lieu of there being nothing, they had to put something out there. And them putting something out there was in their platform, which they released like 2 weeks before Election Day. They had a little line in there that they were going to take away the charitable status for not necessarily pro-life charities, but for charities who were sharing, disinformation about abortion. And like you said, Alissa, it's more than just crisis pregnancy centers. It's basically every Orthodox synagogue, a lot of mosques, gurdwaras, temples, obviously churches. It could even be charities that aren't explicitly pro-life that share those views and values. Like where does it stop? And I don't see how it's constitutional. I mean, even for the Canada Summer Jobs Program back in 2018, when that went before the courts, that got destroyed pretty quickly, and then they had to rearrange it. It's still not great, but it's certainly different than what it was originally. So I just don't see how the Liberals can actually write and introduce this legislation, but I wouldn't put it past them for doing so.
Mm-hmm. And I mean, they can make claims that it doesn't help women, that it's gives them false information, and that giving them diapers doesn't justify all of that. But as both of us have been intimately involved with crisis pregnancy centers, we know that's just not the facts. And if Justin Trudeau truly wanted to listen to women and hear what they had to say, he would absolutely talk to the women who have been helped by these crisis pregnancy centers, keep their children, and choose life-affirming solutions. There are so many stories that I've had. I mean, I ran an internship, I've mentioned it before on the podcast, and every week we would go to a crisis pregnancy center and help out. Sometimes you would hold up signs outside of an abortion clinic that said, a pregnant need help, call this number, we're here to help you, all these life-affirming messages. And oftentimes women would come over to us, or they would go into the crisis pregnancy center, which was located directly beside the abortion clinic. So they actually shared a wall to the abortion clinic. So when you were upstairs in the crisis pregnancy center, if you heard the door open or shut, you knew that somebody was going into the room, the room where they do abortions. There were just, there was, so they had sidewalk counselors as well before the bubble zone laws, so they could stand within a few feet of the abortion clinic, and as women were being dropped off or as they were walking past, obviously, to go into the clinic, they would non-threateningly ask them if they wanted abortion alternative information. That's how they worded it, because they wanted to provide these women with an alternative, because oftentimes the women who are going in there were being dropped off by their boyfriends, by their husbands, by their parents. Oftentimes you would see women crying. I've personally witnessed a woman come out of the abortion clinic and throw up on the side of the road. It's just absolutely atrocious what these girls go through and the pressure that they receive. So if there's any hope for them to not be pressured into abortion and have any type of alternative, they're there to take it. And it's the last resort that they have with these crisis pregnancy centers. So they're absolutely instrumental when it comes to the abortion issue in Canada.
You know, it's very revealing, Alissa, because if you check out Twitter for the last, couple of weeks in the wake of the Dobbs decision from the Supreme Court of the United States that reversed Roe v. Wade, one of the accusations is a very, very weak accusation that pro-abortionists make against us pro-lifers is, well, where are you then? Like, you're just pro-birth, you're not pro-life, you don't care about the kid after the kid is born, you just walk away. And nothing could be further from the truth. It's just bald-faced lies is all that is, because we're running crisis pregnancy centers. We're the ones that are gathering up diapers and formula and finding places to rent for these women, safe housing, not just any housing, but safe housing. We're the ones that are following up with them for a year or two afterward, trying to get them a meaningful employment, helping them to go to school so they can get even more meaningful employment, so they can be independent, trying to do reconciliation between, them and their parents and the grandparents and maybe their boyfriend or husband, if that could happen. I think it was Dr. Callum Miller said on our podcast a couple of weeks ago that something like, according to one study, 40 to 50% of abortions that occur in the Western world are because of coercion from, the father, coercion from peers, coercion from friends, coercion from parents. And so a lot of women have nowhere to go, and they are seeking abortion alternate information. And then you also see on Twitter in the last couple of weeks as well is that a lot of pro-lifers are saying that, yeah, well, let's reform the adoption laws and regimes. I will adopt them. Let them be born and I will adopt them. And then, of course, the pro-abortionists say like, oh, no, that's creepy. Or no, you're providing disinformation. And so the thing that they accuse us of, which is not caring for children after they're born, then all of a sudden they turn that around and say it's icky or it's bad or it's creepy for all these bullshit reasons. That's the word of this podcast for me. I'm sorry, it's bullshit because everything's just bullshit out there. And it's angering, right? But it's very revealing. And this is why I specifically do not use the term pro-choice, because they don't give a shit about any other choice except for abortion for whatever creepy, weird ass reason. They care about abortion. They want abortion numbers to be high. They want it to be available and basically the only option for whatever stupid reason offered to women. They don't actually want to talk to women. They don't actually want to listen to women. They don't want to actually figure things out and kind of roll up their sleeves and do that necessary work to have good, healthy, long-term solutions. They just want as many abortions as possible. So I call people like Justin Trudeau, the people around Justin Trudeau like Katie Telford, they are not pro-choice. They are pro-abortion, because if they were pro-choice, you would see them helping us and volunteering down at those crisis pregnancy centers like you have and like I do, because I sit on the board of directors of that crisis pregnancy center that you're talking about, Alissa, in downtown Toronto that used to share a wall with a private abortion clinic. So I think it's a very revealing thing. And I think that's another reason why they won't actually introduce that legislation, because if you do, it has to go through the process in the House of Commons and the Senate. It has to go through committee. And I think those are stories, and that is a news story that, frankly, they don't want to have. And they should avoid it.
Oh, 100%. Like, if you were truly pro-choice, you would be in favor of abortion alternatives, but they're not. They're only in favor of abortion. That's why they're attacking crisis pregnancy centers. And that's just the truth of the matter. So, obviously, I hope that this party platform promise doesn't go through. And like you said, there's a lot of problems with it. Even different lawyers in the media are saying that there's a lot of holes in this potential legislation. So hopefully it doesn't go forward, but it's something to be aware about, that, the Liberal Party isn't pro-choice. They are absolutely pro-abortion to the point of vindictiveness towards those who are supporting women that choose not to have abortions.
Absolutely.
And on that note, we'll be right back.
Nature communicates with us in a universal language. The sunrise starts a new day. The sunset marks our accomplishments.
The most beautiful communication is where the speaker and the listener match perfectly and understand the same message.
Your future audience is waiting to hear from you. What message do you need to share?
At LaRosse Media, we fashion beautiful communications through our professional video production services and marketing strategies.
Create your own most beautiful message. Visit larosmedia.com and be sure to check out our extended service options.
Dream, produce, market, succeed with LaRosse Media.
Serving Canada from coast to coast to coast.
And we're back. Now, we just talked about two heavy subjects, and we're going to end off on a lighter note. And we're going to do a new segment called our Top 10s. Now, for this segment, we're basically going to count down our top 10 favorite things, whether it be political moments or movies, or in this case, we're going to do comedy shows. So our top 10 comedy shows that we've seen so far. So, Scott, you have your list ready?
Yeah, I like how it's comedy TV shows and not like books or music or pieces of art or places we've been to, but it's what are our favorite trashiest TV shows. So
I thought we would start out,
let's be real. Let's
heavy.
be honest with the people, right? Okay. Do you want to start? Do you want me to start?
Yeah, let's start at number 10. Who do you have as number 10?
Okay, number 10, I have, this is classic, shows a little bit of my age, 11 seasons long, Cheers.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
Cheers.
gotta go
Nice.
where everyone knows your name.
Yeah, I haven't super watched a lot of Cheers, but I mean, it did really well, and it will go down in history, so it's got to be good, right?
Yeah, it's great. Yeah.
My number 10 is Seinfeld.
How is that not number one? Like, what is wrong with you? Do you even know comedy?
Now, my husband is obsessed with Seinfeld. He absolutely loves it. He loves Jerry Seinfeld. He's been to his stand-up comedy shows. I do like it, but I like it in small doses. If I watch too many episodes, it starts to stress me out. Like, George Costanza absolutely stresses me out. And there's always like so many problems that are really cringy, but not in a funny way sometimes. But there are a lot of funny episodes. And every time I have a baby or my friends have a baby, my husband and I are always like, you gotta see the baby.
Yeah, that's a classic.
So, I mean, I haven't seen all the seasons, but we have watched it a lot, and I think it's pretty good, but it's going up my number 10.
So when we come and visit you in a few weeks, I know what Aaron and I are going to do.
Yeah.
You know where you can find us.
Yeah.
Where everybody knows my name. Okay, number
All right,
9.
Number 9. Mm-hmm.
Home Improvement.
Oh, I did not think of that one.
No one does.
See, I was thinking of Last Man Standing because I wanted to give Tim Allen a shout out, but that show is not funny.
Yeah, it
enough to be on
sucks.
my top 10.
Yeah, it's awful. Home Improvement is actually legitimately funny. Yeah.
Jonathan Taylor Thomas. Oh,
Yeah.
Dreamboat. That's why you chose it.
I mean, I can't deny or no confirm.
Okay, my number 9 is Schitt's Creek.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
I haven't seen that all the way through. My sister loves it.
It's super hilarious. Catherine O'Hara is by far the best character. Eugene Levy is pretty good, and the kids are obviously, I don't know their names, but one of them's Eugene Levy's son. But the first half of the seasons is really good. The last half is not as good. It gets kind of like culturally blah, woke and whatever. But it is funny all the way through. There are a lot of funny moments, and I basically chose my top 10 based on the shows that made me actually laugh out loud, and not just like chuckle or kind of smile or whatever, but actually made me laugh pretty hard. And that show's definitely.
Was that a CBC show? Schitt's Creek?
It's a Canadian show for CBC, which is
a rarity.
Shocking.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, number 8 for me, this is a shout out for Andrew Scheer, is The Simpsons.
Oh, yes. Number 8, yeah.
Yeah.
Number 8, that's interesting. Yeah, usually guys love The Simpsons or South Park, so it's like way up on the list, but...
Wow, you're definitely putting me into a type because you won't get that right away. Yeah. But I like the older Simpsons, like when Conan O'Brien was writing for them, like in the earlier seasons. Anything beyond like season 10, season 12, I'm not really interested in, and I haven't paid attention for like 20 years.
Now, were you allowed to watch it as a kid?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Okay, because a lot of Christians were like, that was one of the things, they were never allowed to watch The Simpsons. We watched it in my house.
Yeah, I don't think like there's anything that bad in the first.
Yeah.
See, and for the whole show, I don't think there's anything that bad.
My number 8 is Parks and Rec.
Okay. Yep.
Yeah. And it's one of those shows that I've rewatched multiple times. It's like a kind of downgrade from The Office, but still really funny. And no two characters beat Andy, which is Chris Pratt's character, but most specifically Ron Swanson. And it's actually the nickname that I call my husband, because his name's Aaron. So I just call him Ron and Ron Swanson when I'm really angry. So...
Really angry, or that's really who you wanted to marry and you're just projecting. I like
projecting anger.
Yeah, I like Parks and Rec. It didn't make my top 10, probably top 20. There is a few episodes I like, but I guess I always compare it to The Office, and then it always just pales in comparison. So maybe I should stop doing that when I watch it. Yeah. What are we on? Number 7?
7, yeah.
Yeah. South Park.
Okay.
South Park, they'll just go there. You want to talk about like culturally relevant? Like they're the anti-woke show. And that's...
Well, they're libertarians, right? Like the writers?
Libertarians from Colorado. Actually, when I was in Colorado, when I was in Denver, we went to Mount... is it McKinley? I can't remember the name of the mountain. Anyways, so you go to the top. It's the tallest, one of the tallest peaks in Colorado. And we're at the top. The tour guy was like, yeah, you see that town down there? And we're like, yeah. He's like, that's South Park. And we're like, no way, it's real. And it's an actual town, and that's where they're from.
I've never seen like one episode of South Park, but I do remember a clip going around of Tom Cruise being in the closet, and I thought that was funny.
Yeah, Tom Cruise and John Travolta. That's a good episode.
My number 7 is Friends.
Really? That low?
It's dismay. Yeah.
Yeah, because all these other shows that we're mentioning are so much better.
Yeah, and it's so funny because, all these Christian writers will, and rightly so, talk about how Friends is so terrible. And there is something to the point where it did kind of shape comedies and sitcoms going a certain way, because they had the first like gay wedding on television, and they had a transgendered character being Chandler's father. Right. But these were not, these were lighthearted situations that I think compared to how they're portrayed nowadays is completely different. Not to, justify it too much, but I don't see much, it's too bad. And have you and I gone to Friends trivia nights?
Yeah, we did. We got destroyed. We went in so confident and cocky, and we just got our asses handed to us.
Those are hard.
We don't know anything. Like I know basically all their middle names. Like I thought, okay, Rachel Karen Green. Like I'm gonna own this, and it was like what was on the table in episode whatever.
So hard.
Yeah.
And people actually know.
Oh
That's the worst part.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
What's the next one? Number 6?
Number 6.
Okay. That's 70s show.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's funny.
Yeah. I like it. It's just...
Although when What's-His-Face left, it sucked.
Topher Grace?
Guy.
Yeah. I did the last season or two, not so much, but you know, for like a solid like 6 seasons, it had a really good run, and it was pretty funny all the way through. I know my mom. I know my mom likes certain episodes because it's like a throwback to like things in the 70s, and she finds it kind of cool. But I don't know if she shares the same comedy as I do with it.
I wonder if Aaron would like it for his throwback. He was born in my number 6 is Everybody Loves Raymond.
Oh, that's such a good one. I didn't even have that on there.
Yeah.
Oh, I have to rethink my list maybe.
Fun fact is when I was living in Toronto, I had friends who lived on the 4th floor and I lived on the 9th floor, and 2 of my guy friends lived on the 4th floor with another guy who was from Africa, and I would go over to their apartment and we would be sitting hanging out in the living room, and we'd just hear this like monstrosity of laughter coming from his room, and I would look at them and ask, what is he doing in there? Do you guys know? And they said, oh, he's watching Everybody Loves Raymond. He'd never seen it before, and he just thought it was the funniest thing, and I've never heard anyone laugh so hard by themselves before. But of course I have to put the show on the list, both because Patricia Heaton is pro-life, and she's the wife in the show, and it's just funny all around. Anyway, it does make me laugh.
Are you more of a Deborah or a Marie?
I am definitely a Deborah. Yeah. Thankfully, my mother and my mother-in-law are not like Marie, so count my blessings.
You know what I like about that show is that in that show they're actually practicing Catholics. It's good, clean humor. It's hilarious. There are a lot of very moving moments in the show, and Peter Boyle, who plays Frank, because of the friendship that he developed with Ray Romano, who's also a practicing Catholic, best friends of Kevin James, who's of course has his own show, King of Queens. He didn't convert. He reverted and found his faith again, and then he died a few years after the show was done. So there's a lot I like about the show. So
I actually saw Kevin James at Mass once.
Did you get an autograph?
And his wife and his daughters were all wearing mantillas. No joke. Yeah. No, I did not.
That sounds about right. Number 5?
Yeah.
Right? Friends. That's where I put Friends for me.
All right. Pretty close.
Yeah, not too far off.
My number 5 was Modern Family.
I thought about putting Modern Family on there. Yeah, I don't know. Like, it took me a little bit to get into it. I found it's one of those weird shows where I found the middle seasons to be really good, but the tail end seasons to be not as good.
Yeah, I mean, that's a lot of shows. I find that the gay couple in Modern Family is by far the funniest characters. They're
and you know what?
so hilarious.
It's like it's kind of weird because it's not super like imposed.
No.
On you, it's pretty.
Well, one's sarcastic and dry, and the other one's just very outgoing, but like also a football coach and also flamboyant, and it's just the dynamic is really funny. And then they have, an adopted daughter who is extremely dry and just makes fun of them the whole time. So
Jonathan's gonna stop being friends with us.
Yeah, I know. He probably watches all these shows too, so
probably.
All right.
Number 4.
Yeah.
This will really make him not like me. It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia.
Well, I don't know. That one's like kind of more of a social commentary than the other ones in like a positive way to a certain extent.
It is so dark. Some of the storylines are so dark, and I don't know. Maybe it's because I'm the son of a funeral director, but I just love it. I love that.
And then 2 of the main characters are married in real life, I think.
Yeah, they met on set, and that show's been running for 15, 16 seasons in a row. It's been going strong.
And it's like it started out as kind of it had no money, like a low budget thing. To kind of continue that,
and they've kept it
way through.
Yeah, they've kept it that way. It's like South Park, right? That's why they have just cut felt to begin with. Now it's like actually, animated. But what was your number? What is that? Number 4?
Number 4.
Yeah.
New Girl.
Right. Yeah.
I love New Girl. I just find all the characters really funny, and I don't find Zooey Deschanel annoying, and I think it's an all-around pretty good show from start to finish.
I remember you tried to get me into it, and the first couple seasons, whatever, but then I don't know.
You dropped off.
Yeah,
okay.
Yeah.
I think it's a girly show more.
There's definitely funny moments in it. How many seasons did it run for?
I don't. maybe 6 or something. I'm not sure.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Number 3, Arrested Development.
Okay, yeah, I never got into Arrested Development, but I really do think I should have given it a chance because everybody that I like and think is funny likes that show, so there's got to be.
Have you ever watched it?
Yeah, I watched the first season, I think.
Okay,
Yeah.
because the first 3 seasons are just absolute gold. Then they did a season 4 like 10 years later, then season 5 like 5 years after that. That's kind of whatever. But I don't know. I love the writing so much, and I love how randomly Ron Howard is the one who narrates it.
Yeah.
What was your number?
Actually, I was almost gonna put the Andy Griffith Show.
Like,
on my
actually?
list. Yeah, I love it. I grew up with it, but I didn't. But I do love it. Shout out to Ron Howard. My number 3 is Late Night with Conan O'Brien. So his like original.
Like
show.
I didn't realize we could do talk shows. I thought it had to be sitcoms.
There's no rules.
Like when he first
You won't
started
get
in
fired.
'94 in New York.
Like his original like 1997 like in the 90s show. So he had all these different hilarious segments like Celebrity Survey where they basically would pretend to ask celebrities questions and then have their fake answers, and it was absolutely hysterical. They had like in the year 2000
In the year 2000.
in the year 2000 they'd project what would happen in the year 2000, and then my absolute favorite is Triumph the comic insult dog, who would go to different like political conventions or Star Wars conventions or whatever
With the cigar.
So funny, so funny. So
Do you know what my favorite segment was on his original late night show? Was Walker Texas Ranger Lover. So NBC or bought Universal bought NBC, one of the two, and then all of a sudden NBC had access to all the Walker Texas Ranger shows from like back in the 80s, and he'd be interviewing, I don't know, sometimes like a political candidate or something, like someone of a serious interview, and then he just like look at the crowd, put his hand on the lever, interrupt him, and away you go.
so then they show a little clip.
He is so
funny.
brilliant.
Yeah.
He is so brilliant. A lot of people don't know this about Conan O'Brien, but he went to Harvard. He got a master's degree from there. His writing is just so on point. I think that's one of the reasons why Norm Macdonald, I would say that was probably his favorite comedian, was Conan O'Brien.
Oh yeah.
And so after he got fired, I think by NBC for the Tonight Show, when he took over from who the hell is his name? Jay Leno. He did a tour that summer, and he just went to like a bunch of like 2,000 seat theaters all across, and he'd jam a little bit on his guitar, he'd do some stand up, whatever. And he said that like basically no one came for autographs except for one girl, like some 20-year-old girl down in Texas, and she didn't bring like a picture of him to autograph, but she found his master's thesis. And she got him to sign his master's thesis. So yeah, he's brilliant. I love his writing.
I will correct you as a Norm Macdonald diehard. Conan was not his favorite comedian.
Who was it?
He loved Don Rickles.
Okay.
He loved Letterman was probably his favorite. And he loved Johnny Carson. And he grew up with Johnny Carson.
Yeah, but two of them were dead by the time that he had died, right? So.
Yeah. And actually, there's a special Norm Macdonald's final. It was during the pandemic, so it wasn't actually a stand-up special. He just kind of did it in his room, kind of how we are right now. And then they had a panel afterwards, and David Letterman was on it and talking about his final show that Norm.
Yeah, I remember
did
that.
Stand-up on.
Yeah.
But yeah, they had Conan and Norm Macdonald had the most amazing chemistry, and by far the funniest bits that you'll ever see a guest on a late night show will be Norm Macdonald and Conan O'Brien. So if you haven't seen any of their clips, you have to YouTube it because you will not be disappointed. Although your wife doesn't like Norm
She's a no comedy. She has terrible sense of comedy. One other final, hopefully, because this could just be another podcast, Conan O'Brien tidbit was that he's really, really, really good friends with Lisa Kudrow, who plays Phoebe on Friends, because they went to improv classes together like years ago when they were both starting out, just out of school.
And one of the writers on Conan, on the original Conan, or no, I don't think it was the original Conan show, but one of the writers on one of Conan's shows is now one of the main writers for the Babylon Bee.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense. Okay. Number 2, American Office.
Okay, number 2. Oh, because Seinfeld's going to be number 1. I bet. Okay, cool. The American Office, I get it. Yep. What can you say about The Office? It's amazing. My number 2 is a sports show with Norm Macdonald.
I was going to say Norm Macdonald sports show. Yeah, okay. That makes sense.
Yep.
Yeah.
It was only 1 season. It was on Comedy Central, and he didn't have to know anything about sports to like it, but it did help. But he would just talk about different things that were happening in the sports world, but put his own twist and his own comedy on it and show clips. And one of the guys who's on SNL right now is actually an actor on that show. He played his nephew, and it was just the funniest thing ever. But again, that's on YouTube. So
Adam.
Adam, yeah. So funny.
Adam, the anti-Semite. Okay, my number 1 is Seinfeld, obviously. What's your number?
I spoiled it.
Yeah, whatever. What's your number 1?
My number 1's The Office.
Okay, yeah. Super, super typical. So
you cannot rewatch The Office and not laugh. I've probably seen it, a dozen times at least, and my husband is rewatching some of the episodes and I'm still cracking up, even though I know almost line by line what's gonna happen. It's just the funniest show. And a show is funny when they say, oh, that could never be made now, because cancel culture is so rampant that nothing can be funny right now. So if you actually want to watch something that has serious humor, then you have to watch before the last 5 or 10 years, or 5 years, I guess.
When I first got my wife into it, she could barely get through the first season, which I think is 6 episodes or something like that, because it was just too cringe.
Yeah.
Michael Scott, who is Steve Carell's character, she said it was too much. It made her too anxious, that she just couldn't do it. And thank God that she pushed through, because she loved the entire series. And that's something that we would totally watch again and again and again.
Mm-hmm. Well, on that note, we'll end off this podcast. We want to thank you guys for listening once again. You can check us out on YouTube, on Rumble, on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, basically anywhere you listen to your podcasts. Make sure that you subscribe so you're alerted. Our new episodes come out every Friday morning. And please email us. Let us know what you think. Email us any questions or any comments. You can email us at info@itstartsrightnow.ca. You can follow us on Twitter @rightnowhq or Instagram at that same name. And thanks for joining us on this amazing episode of the podcast, and we'll see you next week.
Bye for now.